Well, hi everybody. How are you? I'm just repacking my Christmas present that I got, and very grateful. I hope you had a blessed Christmas. I had a wonderful Christmas. We basically just stayed home and we FaceTime with Secret Squirrel and his beautiful wife, my daughter-in-law, and we spoiled our puppy, Breezy May. Got her lots of toys. Hopefully we could learn to teach her how to give the toys. But I promised you yesterday that I would tell you the story behind this book and why I'm telling this children's story. When I was in third grade, they left about 3 weeks of third grade and the last 3 weeks of school in third grade to go have my surgery. And then after my surgery, in the 6 weeks of my surgery and having to, being in the cast after the surgery and stuff, that I'll tell you next year. I'll back that up and tell you about that next year. But what I wanted to tell you was I was at Mary Free Bed Hospital with rehab to learn to rewalk. And my parents, because of working and taking care of the kids, my parents couldn't come during the week. And so they always made the Sabbath a wonderful time for me. They'd always come and visit me on Sabbath, and we'd have a family worship and talk and pray and, visit, and stuff like that, and have a good time. And I really, I could only go to the elevator with them, and then I'd have to wheel myself back to my room. And it wasn't, part of me was sad because I was 9, but I was used to it by this point, by this particular time. And as I turned, I'm wheeling back. And as I'm going, I hear this little girl just crying. I mean, Mommy, don't go. Daddy, please don't leave me. I don't want to stay. She's only 3. I don't think she was more than 3 years old. She could have been 2.5, 3 years old. And my little 9-year-old heart was breaking for this little girl. And I thought, what can I do? I don't know, And I thought, well, I got to do something. And I found myself just hearing this little voice say, go knock on the door. And so I went over and I knocked on the door. And I said, excuse me. I said, can I read her a story? And the mommy and daddy said, well, yes. Do you have a book? And I said, no, but I can go get one. Because her room was right across from the play area or where we ate. Because during breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we would eat in the same room. And then after that, we could play and they would pull the toys back out. At least that's how I remember it. It may be different now because it's been over 40 years. You know what I'm saying? I haven't been back there since. And, I've been back there, but since my childhood, I should say. So I went over to the play area, grabbed a couple books. I think 3. I think it was The Puppy, Dan Dan the Band-Aid Man, and Cinderella. So then I would sit there and I would read her the Cinderella, the mouse turned into horses, and the mice, because they turned into horses, got hooked to the carriage, and the carriage, you know what the carriage was? It was a pumpkin. And the fairy godmother did this, and I'm reading the story, and so on and so forth, and I'm showing her the pages, and just, this. And I got to the end of the story, and Mommy and Daddy said, oh, that was wonderful. Read it to her again. The light bulb went off for Mom and Daddy that said, hey, she's in tune with the story and we can slip out. Because every time they'd get to the door, she was screaming. But I was sitting there and I was reading her the little story about the pumpkin turned into a carriage and the 6 little mice turned into horses and a footman and, reading the whole story to her. And then she would calm down and Mom and Daddy slipped out and then I would do that. Well, the next night, I'm sure that Mom and Dad had asked the nurses to come get me to come read stories to little Sarah. I'm just calling her Sarah. I don't think that was her name. And so I would go and I would read little Sarah, Cinderella, or the puppy story, or the Dan Dan the Band-Aid Man every night. It was like clockwork. I just knew instinctively to go in there. And I loved reading her these little stories. I loved being animated with the story. And I didn't know at that time that God was using me. And I read her the stories, and she was there probably 2 weeks, give or take, maybe 3 weeks. All I know is that she left before I did. And when she was being discharged, her and her mommy and her daddy came and looked for me. And it was a total surprise. Mommy and daddy went and bought me all 3 of those books, the little golden books, so that I could have them. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I think it was a whole set, to be honest with you. But I just remember that I read her Dan Dan the Band-Aid Man, Cinderella, and the puppy book, I'm sure. And I might have read her The Frog and the Princess. I think that one came out. But I was reading her 1 or 2 books every night. And so then I would just, read them. And I was so grateful. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because sometimes you think, well, I'm too little. Or I'm too big, I'm too old, I can't move very well. I can't be of service to God. Look at the condition I'm in, or look at my age. I'm only 5, or I'm only 9, 12, whatever our age is. God has a plan for us. In Jeremiah 29:11-13, he tells us so. Seek and and the Bible also says, seek and you shall find. And if you think you can't do something for the Lord, you're wrong. Look at Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He will give you the strength to do it. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. That's where Jeremiah 29:11 comes in. No matter what you're going through and no matter how you feel, know that God loves you. And if you think, well, I don't have money to do this. I was 9 years old. I didn't have money. I didn't even own the books when I was reading them to him. But by God's grace, he put those books at my disposal, and I could read to little Sarah. And I read to her. And I enjoyed it. I was not expecting something in return, but the Lord allowed me to have those little books. And I loved them. And I shared them with my siblings when I got back home. I would still have them to this day, except, unfortunately, we had a house fire, but that's for another story down the road. And I just want you to know that on this Christmas day, when you think, well, I didn't get what I wanted for Christmas, or I didn't do this for so-and-so, there's a whole new year coming ahead, 2025. God has a plan for you. He has a plan for me. And I pray that these stories are a blessing to you. And I want you to know that I'm praying for you. And if you have a prayer request, please leave it in the comments, and I will take the time to pray. And maybe some of my other subscribers will pray also. And I hope you have a very blessed rest of your Christmas. And know that God loves you. And I pray that he shows himself to you some way, somehow, before the end of 2024. May God bless you and richly hold you in his arms. Thank you. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.